Next, we move into standard costing, which is a key tool in management accounting. And it's what we look at, how much should it cost us for either buying material or for direct labor or overhead. We're going to do it based on some historical analysis, some engineering analysis to see what should things cost us. This is important because we're probably going to use that data to determine how to price our product. When we look at this idea of standards, sometimes we want tight standards, which creates stretch goal to make people manage to it. But what happens is that you might have people give up on it, that it's too hard to attain, and so people would end up buffering their budgets in order to create themselves some slack. So we'll look at how do we use variances. When we look at standard costing, it does two things. It measures what should it have cost, and then it measures very precisely what did it cost. And the comparison of that is called variance analysis. Is it a positive variance, in which case things cost you less than expected, or is it a negative variance, in which case it costs more money than you expected? So let's do an example where we look at two of these three elements, direct material and direct labor variance. I've chosen not to do variable overhead analysis because the more controllable pieces are direct material and direct labor. So that's why I focused on it. Within each, we'll see a price variance and a quantity. Price being, did it cost, the materials cost us more, not because we used more or less of it, but because the cost per unit went up, like the cost of fuel went up or cost of sugar went up, etc. Or was it the quantity variance where we were inefficient? We used a lot more material than we should have. Same thing holds for labor. Was the variance because we paid more per hour to the employees, or did it cost more because they were less efficient, took them more hours to do the work? We'll show this by way of example. For direct materials, we need certain data. First is, what is the standard price? In other words, what should it have cost us per unit, and how much should we have used per unit? And that's what we look at, standard price and standard quantity. What things should be in terms of the price paid and the units of raw material used for a given product. The first one we'll look at is the price variance. This looks at the difference between actual and standard cost of the actual material used. It's favorable if our actual is less than standard. It's unfavorable if we spent more than the standard. That would be the idea on price. And this would be based on an assessment of purchasing. Were we able to buy the product for less dollars per pound or dollars per yard, or did we pay more? So this is usually seen as an assessment of the purchasing manager. Quantity is similar, except we're looking at what did we use. What should we have used compared to what did we use? So if we used less hours or less units, like pounds or yards, then it's favorable. If we use more pounds or yards, so actual is greater than standard, then we use more units, which is unfavorable. Let's do an example. We have these 800 hats, so Langley made 850 using 980 yards, costing $3.15 a yard, and the standard for materials is 1.2 and 3. So here are all the little ingredients all over these sentences. So first is quantity. We scheduled to do 800, but the actual is 850 hats using 980 yards, and the standard was 1.2 yards at $3 a yard. So let's look at the analysis. First, the standard quantity is that we had 850, which is the amount of actual units, times the standard use of amount of yards at 1.2. So 1.2 yards times 850 is 1020. We should have used 1020 in terms of yards. Now we can break out into the actual cost, and on the far right, the flexible budget cost. Actual cost is the 980, which is right here, 980 yards, times the actual cost per yard, $3.15. So it costs us $3,087 for the material. Under flex, it should have cost us $10.20 in terms of yards, times the standard price of $3, or $3,080. Right? So that's what it should have cost. Now, the variance is interesting in that it breaks into two components. First is when we take the actual quantity, which notice that held constant, but only varied the standard price, we paid it more per unit than our standard. So it's an unfavorable variance of $147, right? We should have spent $2,940, but we did spend $3,087. So that's unfavorable variance for the purchasing of the material. The next variance looks at the next two. What's the quantity variance? Here we get credit, if you will, for using less material. We're budgeted at 1020. We actually use 980, and here we lock the price at $3 since we're only evaluating our usage. So we had a positive variance of 120 in terms of the quantity. So we used less quantity, but it costs us more per yard. So the overall variance is $27 unfavorable. Even though we save money on materials, each yard costs us more than we budgeted. So on balance, we're off by $27. Here is just another way to look at it. The price variance is the actual quantity, so we lock that down and we subtract the pricing, actual versus standard. We use 980, and the quantity variance, we paid 15 cents more per yard, so the unfavorable is 147. Quantities goes the other way. So we lock the standard price of $3 and we look at the quantity and we use less quantity. Therefore, we had a favorable balance or favorable variance of 120. So why might this happen? Favorable price variance means we're a good negotiator, we have high volume, or the bad kind of scenario would be we lowered our quality. If we use a lower quality material, we can get it for a cheaper price. Or if a seller's in trouble, we might be able to get it at bargain prices. In terms of unfavorable, we were maybe paying more because our volumes were high enough, we didn't qualify for discounts, or we didn't order in a timely way or didn't negotiate well. These are reasons why we might pay more per pound or per yard than what we had budgeted. On the quantity, if we're favorable, that means we were using less material and maybe the labor was more efficient or the machine's more efficient, or maybe it's because we had waste. And the waste is sometimes based on the machinery or the outcome of the machines, or maybe the raw material was lower quality, so we had to work around worse material and therefore scrap more of it. And finally, it's also possible that we didn't train our people properly, so they were wasteful in their use of the fabric. We see a variance, it gives us a direction, favorable or unfavorable, then we start our search as to why did it happen. So in terms of direct labor, we're going to use this example again. So the same scenario, but this time we're looking at labor. We use 130 labor hours, costing $11.90 an hour. The standard is 0.15 hours at $12 an hour. Same approach as we did for direct material. Standard hours equals the number of hats, 850, times the standard number of hours per hat, which is 0.15. So we should have spent 127.5 hours. So now we look at the layout just like we did for materials. Actual cost is actual hours times actual rate. That means it's actual. 130 times 11.9 is 1,547. Go to the far right, it's the standard hours, which is what we just derived, 127, because we're flexing. And then we have a standard rate of $12 an hour. So it costs us 15, or should have cost us 15.30. It actually costs us 15.47. So overall, we know we have an unfavorable variance there too. Let's look at why did that happen. The rate variance was favorable. Notice that the rate we paid was $11.90. The standard was $12. We got 10 cents less per hour, and that generated $13. Then we look at their efficiency. It should have taken 127 hours, but it took us 130 hours. So we went the other way, and an inefficiency or labor efficiency unfavorable variance of $30. Overall, we're off $17 unfavorable, as we saw. Is the difference between what we actually paid, $15.47, versus what we should have paid, $15.30. So we're off 17 unfavorable. But the beauty of variance analysis is it tells us why. It happened because our labor wasn't efficient and we were actually able to get a lower rate. So again, we'll look at a formula approach. Labor rate variance equals lock down the hours and compare the rates. And that's 130 hours times the difference in rate. So we had a favorable $13. On labor efficiency, we locked the rate and we varied the hours. the rate is $12, that's standard, times the difference of our labor efficiency, and we ended up with $30 unfavorable for efficiency. So we paid less money, but maybe they weren't as good. What might be reasons for this? For a rate side, maybe we hired less skilled people. You kind of get what you pay for. Or maybe there was a broad reduction in rates. Unlikely, but it does occur. And if we have unfavorable labor rate variance, then we overhired for the job. More skilled people pay more per hour, or maybe the general wages rose. On efficiency, favorable means that they were skilled, our machines working better, the raw material made it easier to work with, we had better morale or job satisfaction or working conditions. These are favorable things that would have us work more efficiently than what we estimated. On the other side, unfavorable means that maybe they weren't trained, or the machines didn't work, or there were low quality materials, or morale was low, or conditions were bad. Again, the variance gives us a direction to look into, but it doesn't really tell us the reason. So summarizing Mod 23, standard cost and variance. In responsibility accounting, we like to match the responsibility and authority with the reporting people receive, and it normally mirrors the org chart. The performance under static and flex, basic answer is flex is better because it considers the number of units produced as a factor in how to create the budget number by which to compare the actuals. Standard cost variances for direct materials allows us to break out how much more or less did we spend on material and why. Was it due to the price of the material, or was it due to the amount we used of the material? And finally, LO4 is standard cost variance reporting on labor, direct labor. Same thing here. Was it favorable or unfavorable in terms of total dollars? And breaking into components of their rate, did we pay more or less per hour? Or efficiency, were they able to make things faster or slower than what we expected? The techniques of standard costing allow companies to quickly analyze where they're in trouble, again, mostly from manufacturing, by material costs or by labor costs.